Greetings everyone and welcome to SpaceWeek Live on this Sunday, December 19th, 2021. This is me, Raw Space, unsurprisingly, and let's get to it. So we had a fairly eventful week last week, nothing compared to the week that's coming up, but let's take a look. Starting out on Monday, last Monday, a Russian Proton rocket launched out of Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan with the Express AMU-3 and AMU-7 communication satellites to geostationary orbit. Let's check out the launch.
Первый есть контакт подъема 10-й. Захват 10-го принял. Первый. Есть запуск двигателя первого ступеня Кедалхида. Двигатель машины. Прошел контакт подъема. 20 секунд. Давление, примерно сгорания. Двигатели в норме.
Proton has that distinctive solid rocket motor profile to it. Now, also on Monday, a Chinese Long March 3B lifted off from Xichang in southwest China with, let's see here, whoop. Oh, nope. Where's Xichang? There we go. Ooh. Xichang in southwest China with Tianlian 202. I actually pronounced that all right. I thought I was going to trip up. The second satellite in China's new data relay satellite system. Similar to NASA's TDRS, or Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System, the Tianlian constellation will allow Chinese mission control to maintain contact with the Chinese space station as it orbits the Earth. Congratulations. Unfortunately, the following day was not so... There we are. The following day was not so fortunate. Let me switch to... on Tuesday, a Chinese Kuaizhou 1A rocket, and I don't actually have video of this because they didn't release it. Chinese Kuaizhou 1A rocket lifted off from Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in the northwest of China, in the desert, with the first pair of GSAT private navigation satellites from GSpace. Or G-Space? GSpace. Unfortunately, the vehicle experienced, quote, abnormal performance, unquote, during the launch, or after the launch, and it was unable to deliver the satellites to their target orbit. I saw rumors that there was a failure in the third stage of some sort, but no details have been released. But unfortunately, that launch was a failure. Now, Kuaizhou rockets have had a tough couple of years. Fully half of the Kuaizhou series launches since July 2020 have failed. One Kuaizhou 11, and two Kuaizhou 1As. So out of 6 launches, 3 have failed. And there's another Kuaizhou coming up later this week. So hopefully that one is successful. Then on Wednesday, NASA conducted an 8.5-minute hot fire test of an Aerojet Rocketdyne RS-25 engine. 4 RS-25s will soon power the Space Launch System rocket's core stage during the upcoming Artemis moon missions. Whoops, I started at the end. Let's start at the beginning, shall we? There we are. Let's try that again. So if you're not already familiar, the RS-25 is a venerable rocket engine that 16 of which will, well, the first 16 RS-25s to be used in the Artemis program actually are flight-proven engines that previously flew on the space shuttle. And so the RS-25 has been in use for almost 40 years, actually, for 41 years now, I guess. Since the first space shuttle flight. It burns hydrogen and oxygen, and as such produces a very clean exhaust of water vapor, and a lot of it. But it's a beautiful engine, and the test again ran for 8.5 minutes and was successful in that time. Sometimes, so look at that exhaust, it's so clean. Occasionally there will be an issue during testing and a test will be cut short, but this one ran full to completion. Then on Saturday was a big day for SpaceX, with 2 Falcon 9 launches within 15 hours of each other, which I don't know if that's a first, but it's certainly noteworthy, and there aren't many launch providers that can support that kind of pacing, at least that have supported that kind of pacing previously. But so the first one was a Starlink launch, Starlink 4.4, from Vandenberg Saturday morning, and the second was Turksat 5B satellite in about 15 hours later. Let's check out the Starlink launch from Vandenberg.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9. Go Starlink.
Angle's pushing down range. Stage 1 chamber pressures are nominal.
And the booster landing. Video was a little bit ratty, but didn't fully cut out. As big a following as SpaceX has, it is a little surprising that they wouldn't invest a little bit of time and effort into getting a relay for their video from the drone ship, either in the form of a drone or like an aerial drone or a standby one of their support ships, because the drone ship isn't out there all alone. I don't think anyway. But in any case, to transmit that video so that it doesn't get jostled about so much. And then, oh yes, they did not have video of the deployment because they didn't have an uplink at that time, but the deployment of the Starlinks was successful. Now let's check out the TurkSat launch, TurkSat 5B. This satellite was headed for geostationary orbit.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff.
Pitching downrange.
Stage 1 chamber pressures nominal.
Gorgeous launch, as always. Now, we did also have footage of the landing.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Had a successful second engine cutoff, and
Nominal orbit
the
insertion.
landing burn has just started. And we just heard good orbit. Confirmed a nominal orbital insertion. We're now
Stage
waiting
1
on our
landing
Falcon
leg
to
deployed.
land on drone ship, a short fall of gravitas.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there you have it. That's SpaceX.
I like how they're so elaborate with most of their ship names. They've got, of course, I Still Love You, Just Read the Instructions, A Short Fall of Gravitas, and they had Go Searcher, Go Navigator, and then their latest support ship that they use to retrieve the payload fairings is just called Bob. That's the name of their ship, or their the ship that they've contracted anyway. And here is the deployment of TurkSat 5B. We got a real treat because, first of all, we don't get too many views of the Earth from a high orbit or from a high altitude on its way toward geostationary transfer orbit. And we also got the moon in the background, which you can't see much detail, but it appears as a bright white blob. But check out this video. I've sped it up 2 times, so the voices will be kind of chipmunky, but I just sped it up for pacing. But check this out.
payload separation confirmed.
And there you have it. We've received a successful separation of the TurkSat 5B satellite from the Falcon 9 second stage, which now brings today's webcast coverage to a close.
Expected losses.
Thank you to Airbus for entrusting us with the TurkSat 5B satellite. A big thank you to the range and the Federal Aviation Administration. We really appreciate having your support for today's mission. It's been an exciting day here at SpaceX, having supported 2 missions within roughly 18-hour time frame. But as we mentioned before, it doesn't end there. Be sure to join us for the next cargo resupply mission to the International Space Station with the CRS-24 mission, currently targeted for Tuesday, December 21st at 5:06 a.m. Eastern Time. And to all our viewers, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again very soon.
Now, if I had to guess, okay, let's back up a few seconds. Let's do a little eyeballing here of the Earth. If I had to guess, I would say that they were at that moment off the west coast of Africa, and I say that because the land beyond those clouds there looks pretty brownish, and there's a plume of dust that we can see drifting over the ocean, and that is very typical for the west west coast of Africa, because there are unbelievably huge plumes of Saharan desert Saharan desert sand that blow westward across the Atlantic Ocean and get deposited all over the ocean, as well as over South America, which actually is one of the major sources of fertilizing nutrients for the Amazon rainforest, is Saharan desert sand and fossilized ammonite shells that have basically turned into desert over the course of eons. And those are waterborne, ancient, microscopic creatures that were in an ancient lake long ago. And anyway, that's actually where the Amazon rainforest gets a lot of its nutrients from, is from the Sahara Desert, oddly enough. But, all right. So, let's see. That was it for the launches this past week. Now, we did just see... yes, do I have this? I don't have it queued up. Let me see. We just had, a little while ago, the hatch closing of Soyuz MS-20 with Yusaku Maezawa, the Japanese private citizen, Yozo Hirano, another Japanese private citizen, and then the Russian cosmonaut, I don't remember his name, but a Russian cosmonaut who was the pilot of the Soyuz. So this was a special space tourism trip that lasted almost 12 days, a little over 11 days, for those two, courtesy of Space Adventures, which is a company which has sent quite a few people to space on Soyuz craft over the past 20 years. And let's see here. Ah, yes. Here we have a little bit of video. So this was actually a couple of hours ago. They closed a hatch on the Soyuz. So we're actually in between streams right now. So it's currently 5:18 my time, 5:18 p.m. my time. And in about 75 minutes, in an hour and a half, we are going to begin the live stream for the undocking and deorbit of Soyuz MS-20 with those 3 individuals on board. So that's it for last week. Looking ahead to this week, I'm going to work off the calendar rather than narrating from a script. So, like I said, in a short time at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 23:30 UTC, begins the undocking coverage of Soyuz MS-20, with the landing coverage 2.5 hours later at 9 p.m. Eastern, 0200 UTC. And then landing is scheduled at 10:13 p.m. Eastern, 0318 18? No, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. 0313, that's a typo there on the calendar. And they'll be landing to the southeast of Zhezkazgan, Kazakhstan, which is about 100 miles east of Baikonur Cosmodrome, where they launched from. So then on Tuesday at 5:06 a.m. Eastern, 10:06 UTC, is the launch of another SpaceX vehicle, a Falcon 9 with CRS-24 Cargo Dragon. This will be another cargo delivery to the International Space Station. Yeah. Excuse me. And again, this will be using a Dragon 2 spacecraft, since the Dragon 1, the original Dragon cargo spacecraft, has been retired. Then also on Tuesday, December 21st at 9:33 a.m. Eastern, 14:33 UTC, is the launch of a Japanese H-2A rocket with Inmarsat 6 F1 communications satellite. So it was European built, but launched by the JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, or more specifically, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency. There you go. This particular communications satellite carries L-band and Ka-band payloads to provide mobile communication services to airplanes and ships. The rocket will fly in a 204 configuration with 4 strap-on solid rocket boosters. Then on Wednesday, December 22nd, at 5 p.m. Eastern, or 2200 UTC, is a Virgin Orbit launch of their Launcher 1 rocket, which is an air-launched rocket, if you're not familiar. It gets carried under the wing of their Boeing 747 carrier airplane called Cosmic Girl. And because if you recall, the Virgin Group has access to a lot of airplanes, being with Virgin Atlantic. So one of their venerable 747s was repurposed to be a rocket launching platform. So the rocket will drop from underneath the wing of the Cosmic Girl 747 and then launch its payload into low Earth orbit, into a mid-inclination low Earth orbit. This mission is called Above the Clouds, and let me just read what it says here. On board will be several experimental space-based communications and in-space navigation satellites, plus a NASA-sponsored university satellite for the U.S. Department of Defense Innovation Unit as part of their Space Test Program's Rapid Agile Launch Initiative. On board will also be 2 nanosats for Polish satellite maker Sat Revolution, Stork 3, which will serve the agricultural sector with medium-resolution photos, and SteamSat 2, which will test Steamjet Space Systems water-fueled thrusters for in-space propulsion. Water-fueled thrusters for in-space propulsion. That's an interesting concept. I would be interested to look into that a little deeper, because that sounds intriguing. And interesting factoid about the Launcher 1 system is that it can be launched from anywhere there is a sufficiently long airfield. It doesn't have to, like, they launch out of the Mojave Air and Spaceport in California, but they could launch from anywhere. And so that's how it's designed, is to be a rapidly usable and deployable launch system that can basically launch from anywhere. Then on Thursday, December 23rd, at 5:30 a.m. Eastern, 10:30 UTC, is a Chinese, or rather might be a Chinese Long March 7A rocket with the HOTS satellite, HOTS. Not expecting any live coverage of that, or of most Chinese launches. Later that same day at 10 a.m. Eastern, 1500 UTC, is the launch of a Russian Angara A5 rocket on its on another test flight, the third orbital test flight. So this will be launching from far northern Plesetsk Cosmodrome in Russia, which is the northernmost spaceport in the world. And it will be headed for a geostationary orbit. So the previous Angara launch deployed its, actually it didn't deploy its satellite, it remained attached to the satellite, but it reached an orbit near the geostationary altitude, which is approximately 22,000 miles. If you want to do the metric conversion, I can't do that in my head. But then, so it reached its target of geostationary, but then it raised itself to a graveyard orbit, I think about 100 miles further to get it out of the way of geostationary. So there it will remain. And that's the same, expected to be the same flight profile for this test flight. We're not expecting any live coverage of the Russian test flight, but we may have footage. We probably will have footage after the fact. And then, what we've all been waiting for 20 years, on Friday, December 24th, Christmas Eve, at 7:20 a.m. Eastern Time, or 12:20 UTC, is the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope. Now, this sucker has been, when I say long awaited, this thing has been in the works for more than 20 years. The launch itself has been delayed a few times this year, but previously the development of this space telescope was delayed numerous times. It was originally supposed to cost something like $150 million back in the 90s, but it got, delayed. There were cost overruns. The mission was expanded and modified. There were technical difficulties, problems during tests requiring recalibration, reconfiguration, whatever, re-engineering. And so ultimately the overall cost is, I think, $10 billion now. But once it launches, it will be the new great space telescope. Now, it could be compared to Hubble in its magnitude, in its importance, but it is a very different space telescope than Hubble. First of all, let me just go over the timeline, and then I'll switch back to full screen and talk about James Webb a little bit more. So, coverage, the live stream, it's going to be a continuous live stream through launch, starting at 3 a.m. Eastern. This is on the 24th. 3 a.m. Eastern, or 0800 UTC. And that's when we get a fueling update from NASA. Now, I will be bringing you, I'll also be hosting the live stream. I'm going to come on at 5:30 a.m. Eastern and provide an introduction, but I'm going to be providing you with the NASA coverage rather than the Ariane space coverage, because I think that that it is likely we'll get a lot more scientific information from the NASA coverage than from Ariane Space, who tends to focus more on the commercial aspects of their launches. So, in any case, at 3 a.m. or 0800 UTC, we're going to get an update on the fueling of the rocket, which is going to be an Ariane Space Ariane 5 rocket, launching from Kourou in French Guiana in South America. It's north of Brazil. Then at 4:45 a.m. Eastern, 09:45 UTC, we have some more highlights and launch pad views. 5:30 a.m. Eastern, 10:30 UTC, I come on and will provide my live introduction. Then at 6 a.m. Eastern, 1100 UTC, the regular launch coverage begins. And of course, all of that will be right here on this channel for you. The launch time, so coverage begins at 6 a.m. The launch is 80 minutes later at 7:20 a.m. Eastern, 12:20 UTC. Now, they do have a 30-minute launch window, so the launch could be anywhere between that time and 30 minutes after. And then depending on how long that coverage continues, there is also a 9 a.m. or 1400 UTC post-launch briefing, which I think I will lump into the same broadcast because everybody will be here. So, but yeah, so going back to full screen, James Webb Space Telescope is the latest in a series of great space telescopes, whereas the Hubble works primarily in the optical wavelengths of light, the visual part of the spectrum that we can see, which is why we get all these beautiful pictures from Hubble. The James Webb Space Telescope operates in the infrared end of the spectrum, which is beyond where our eyes can see. So the pictures we're going to get back from James Webb are not going to look the same as the pictures we get from the Hubble. They're not going to have the range of colors, at least naturally, as we see in Hubble photographs. Now, they are going to process the photos so that we can visually interpret them, because obviously we don't see in infrared, so they need to basically dial up the wavelength of the photographs so that we can see what's going on. But they're also going to use false color processing to highlight different aspects of the photos. But the purpose is, so as you may know, the universe is expanding, and that expansion is accelerating. And so the farther away a galaxy is, the faster it's moving away from us. That's the way the universe is structured. So the farthest objects that we can see are moving away much, much faster than closer objects, which produces an effect called blue shift, red shift. My terminology is a little rusty, but either red shift. There you go, red shift, because the wavelength of light actually gets stretched by the expansion of space-time. So let's say your light had an arbitrary wavelength of 1 inch. Go so many millions of light years away, that wavelength will have actually been stretched because space is pulling apart so fast over those vast distances that the light wavelength actually gets stretched. As a result, the farthest galaxies from us become more and more red. Like literally, if you were looking at them in a telescope, they would look more red until they eventually faded into invisibility, because the wavelength would have stretched beyond, because red is a longer wavelength, blue is a shorter wavelength. The wavelength of light would have actually been stretched so far that you can't see it. It's no longer in the visual range of the electromagnetic spectrum. And so it would have gone into the infrared. And so if you go even farther, like way, way, way far, well beyond our cosmic horizon, which we don't even know if there's universe out there that far, but there very well could be. There's no reason for us to think there isn't. The wavelengths could have been stretched so far that they're in the radio and whatever's longer wavelength than radio end of the spectrum. So anyway, we need special telescopes to see very, very far into deep space. And so the hope is that the James Webb Space Telescope is going to allow us to do that, because it is the most sensitive and the most powerful infrared telescope ever made. And it's going to be orbiting as opposed to Hubble, which circles the Earth at an altitude of a few hundred miles, like this 400 miles-ish. The James Webb Space Telescope is going to be sitting, well, it's not going to be sitting, it's going to be in a halo orbit around a imaginary point in space on the opposite side of the Earth from the Sun called the L2 Lagrange point. And that's a gravitationally semi-stable point in space where you can actually orbit a satellite around this point in space and it will stay there. And it's about 1.5 million miles away from the Sun from the Earth. So if you drew a line from the Sun through the Earth and went 1.5 million miles further, you would reach the L2 Lagrange point. That is where James Webb is going to be orbiting. And the reason they want it so far away, and the reason they want it, they want it shielded from the Sun, and they want it pointed away from the Earth. They don't want the radio chatter from Earth interfering with its signal. They don't want the infrared interference from the Sun, because the Sun is constantly emitting gobs and gobs of infrared radiation, which interfere with infrared observation of the cosmos. So if you let me bring up a picture of the James Webb. I'm sure you've all seen it, but let's take a look anyway. Oh, that's weird looking. Okay, where's a good photo? Let me switch to the browser. Oh boy. All right. Here we go. This is... Nope. There we go. All right, here's an artist's impression of the James Webb Space Telescope. And so here you see the gold reflecting surface of the telescope, full of those hexagonal panels. A reflector on this triangular mast that gathers all of the infrared light that is reflected onto it from those reflectors, and it then beams back down into the center, where it goes down this little protrusion that's sticking out of the middle of the dish. All the light gets focused down through that hole and gets received inside the guts of the telescope behind those mirrors. Now, the largest feature of the telescope, besides the dish itself, are these tennis court-sized heat shields. Basically, they're infrared. They're like foil, and they stretch out in multiple layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers, to provide basically to block as much of the sun's radiation as possible from reaching either the dish, the receiver, or the sensors that they have inside this box, which is the guts of the telescope. And the reason is because they don't want that noise in the signal. They don't want the sun's radiation to interfere with their observations of the deep cosmos. And so the whole thing has to operate at very, very cold temperatures. And so they don't want any heating from the sun at all. And so the process of getting the telescope from its current, where it's currently located, all folded up inside of the payload fairing of an Ariane 5 rocket, to unfurled and deployed like this, is actually going to take quite some time, and there are, I think, a couple hundred steps that have to be executed perfectly in order for all of this to unfold successfully. But they've tested it rigorously. They have all sorts of processes in place for dealing with, for managing, like, critical systems versus not so critical systems. Yeah, it's just scary to have so many moving parts and so many potential points of failure, despite how much it's been tested. Now, it was supposed to launch on the 18th, but there was which was yesterday, but there was a hook? There was a hook that came loose from somewhere and introduced vibrations into the, this was during transport, introduced vibrations into the telescope that they had to then do some analysis and determine whether everything was still okay. And so then the launch was delayed until the 22nd. And then it was delayed 2 more days because of a cable issue of some sort. But we're still looking good. We're looking good for the 24th, Christmas Eve launch of the James Webb Space Telescope. And first light is expected to be, well, it should be fully deployed within about a month of launch. Their final maneuver to circularize a halo orbit around the L2, the Earth-Sun L2 Lagrange point, is expected, I think, about a month after launch. And I'll have some more detail on the timeline of things during my introduction to the James Webb launch on the morning of the 24th. It's going to be a nice Christmas present for the world. But all right, so let me take a moment to thank and introduce, or rather to thank and extend a welcome to our newest channel member, Anthony Rice. He joined yesterday, I believe. So thank you, Anthony. Now, let me get to your questions. All right, what do you got for me? Okay, so Dan Todd, another recent member. Not your concern, except for a joke. Okay, so CC, Tigress. Okay, all right. Dan Todd again. Off topic. Okay, well, I'll read the question because why not? It's my show. I can read it if I want. What is a good pen drive burner to give persistence to a Linux Mint system running totally off the pen? Thanks, especially when this comes during your presentation. I don't have any recent USB drive. I don't call them pen drives. I call them USB drives or USB sticks. But I don't have any modern ones. Like my USB drives or USB flash drives are quite old, and some of them are failing. I usually just use them to install an operating system and transfer some data. I don't use them for regular operations. But generally speaking, if I were to buy a USB flash drive, I would get a SanDisk or a Corsair or a Kingston, one of the reputable top tier memory chip manufacturers. Basically, is what you want. But those would be the 3 most prominent brands that I would recommend: SanDisk, Corsair, and Kingston. I don't even know if Kingston makes USB flash drives, but they definitely make memory. All right. Regarding James Webb, from Robert Hill, if the launch gets delayed again, when is the alternate launch window? So Typically, unless there's a delay which requires further analysis, like they have to, go in there and investigate or query the telescope systems to see if there's a problem. If it's just a matter of a launch delay, like let's say the weather isn't cooperating, typically there's a launch window every day. So now, if the target orbit were around the Earth, like let's say it was targeting a low Earth orbit, then typically the launch window would begin about 20 minutes earlier on the next day. And that's because of just the orbital dynamics due to the rotation of the Earth, when things would align up with their target orbit. For a geostationary orbit, because geostationary doesn't move with respect to the ground. It is moving, but it's moving in synchronization with the rotation of the Earth. But because a geostationary orbit doesn't move with respect to the ground, there really isn't a change in time. So if you have launch windows on successive days, they're usually at the same time for geostationary, and split the difference for medium Earth orbit, like for a GPS satellite, because those orbit about halfway to geostationary because they orbit every 12 hours instead of every 24 hours. And so it would be 10 minutes difference. But for this unique L2 Lagrange point halo orbit, I would expect that they have a launch window at roughly the same time every day, because it's not it's not affected in any way by the Earth's rotation. But we'll just have to wait and see. But if the weather's not cooperating, if the forecast for the following day is good, then I'd expect the launch window to be at an equivalent time the next day. Stephen Ford, how real is the financial problem with SpaceX? Okay, so it was last week or the week before, thereabouts. Elon tweeted, the master tweeter. No, actually, he didn't tweet. It was what was it, an internal memo that was leaked, or an internal voicemail or something. Anyway, there was some internal correspondence that was leaked from SpaceX where Elon was saying that the company was going to go bankrupt if they didn't have enough launches, and doom and gloom. In this one's humble opinion, internal memoranda and communications like that should remain internal, because operating a company, just like operating one's personal life, can be messy and imperfect, and there can be drama. And if you focus on the drama, then it's going to add to your uncertainty, to your stress. If you're an investor, it's going to add to the likelihood that you may divest yourself of that investment. So, whenever any non-positive information comes out about a company, confidence takes a hit. But as for how much substance there is to this dire proclamation from Elon that the company is going to be in trouble if it doesn't get going with its Starship launches, I wouldn't pay any attention to it. I mean, the fact is that development is continuing on Starship, although it seems pretty slow-paced these days compared to, like, let's say earlier this year. But their Falcon 9 launch schedule continues to be robust. I don't have the numbers, but I mean, SpaceX remains, one of the most prolific, I'd say the most prolific single launch provider in the world. perhaps second to the Chinese Space Agency. But they kind of flip-flop, kind of like Elon and Jeff Bezos flip-flop who's the richest person in the world on any given year. But I wouldn't worry about it. SpaceX is well positioned as really the premier launch provider in the world, with the most reliable rockets, and arguably, I mean, UL8 does a very good job with hitting their launch targets, but they're also much more expensive than SpaceX, so competitiveness is a big factor. So regarding the financial problem, I wouldn't worry about it until they actually announce that they're having to restructure or something like that, and then, oh gosh, well, I guess it was real. But I don't like counting chickens before they're hatched, or counting dead chickens before they're dead, or whatever analogy fits this scenario. All right. So, and also, despite the fact that most folks here probably are big fans of SpaceX, not necessarily fanboys, but we are rooting for SpaceX for sure, and we enjoy SpaceX launches and broadcasts because they're doing a great job. But and we laugh about Elon, and we may admire him for his ability to gather the right people to create these cool things like Tesla cars and solar panels and rockets and satellites. But he is, at the end of the day, he's still a businessman, and as such, I mean, if you're one of his subjects at SpaceX, he might not always be as nice as as he is to, say, for example, Tim Dodd giving him a personal tour of Starbase. So, business is business. But at the end of the day, what matters is, do they get the job done? And so far, they're doing swimmingly at that. So, I think that might wrap it up for this episode. In about a half hour, we have the coverage of the undocking, deorbit, and landing of Soyuz MS-32 with Yusaku Maezawa, Yozo Hirano, and the Russian cosmonaut. So make sure to tune in for that, and I will see you. If not then, I will see you in the next stream. So bye for now. Keep it raw. And hey, look, my Bennu shirt came in. The pillow got in last week, but the shirt came in a couple days ago. So anyway, take care. See you around. Until next time.